I did not want to go to college. That was number one. I should go to Ohio State and get my license to teach. That was what my father said. And one of the things he said that was most important, learn to do more than one thing, because you don't know what the future holds. So be prepared to do more than one thing. I can teach you the business, which he did, but he called it a license to teach. So here I came down to Ohio State in 1945.
I think the real factor that led me to Ohio State was first my father. My father was quite fond of Ohio State, and he sort of made me think hard about going to Ohio State. But the thing that really seemed to shine through was what Ohio State had to offer students and the fees. I think the combination of academic reputation and the accessibility for students who really didn't have a lot of resources were things that were very attractive to me, and sort of made the decision a lot easier. There's a lot of places I would have liked to go, but I couldn't afford it.
But actually, I grew up an orphan. My family died. I was one of 10 siblings. I'm the last of the 10. My brother died just last year, and he and I had been together all the time. I grew up in the, what do you call it, the children's services, and I did some time in foster homes, but they afforded us, we orphans, they afforded us a chance to get an education, but there were some people, a couple in the south end of Columbus named Johnson. They knew my family years ago when we were young, and they adopted us. And we stayed, my brother and I stayed together.
I was born in Sandusky, 1925. I'm 83 years old right now. My father was a domestic worker. Mother was a domestic worker, but she ended up being a supervisor at the Philco radio plant. It had been preached to me about going to college. I can't say that I really was determined to go until after I got out of the service. And I just didn't want to work in a foundry all my life. I didn't want to work in a factory all my life. So I decided to go to school.
Columbus was highly discriminated. In fact, I grew up in the East End. My earlier years were in the East End, which was self-reliant. It's just all black community, but it was it had a business and everything. You really didn't go outside of the East Side for anything, really.
They had a swimming pool there in the high school that they would not let African Americans swim in. So there we were, our parents were paying first-class taxes, but being treated like a second-class citizen. My dad was one who believed, get yourself an education so that you don't have to be subjected to this. He had the idea that things were going to change.
Cousin's name was John Douglas, and both of us were basketball players. You know, we had toyed with the notion of going out for the varsity, but of course back in 1945 there were no African Americans playing varsity basketball at Ohio State, so that was a dream that was not going to come true for a while.
So my father is kind of unconcerned, sort of quiet guy. He says, now we're bringing her down here and we want to see the room, and we understand that she wants to go and live at Neal Hall. And, well, long story short, the Miss Gordon says, oh, well, you know, all of the rooms are already assigned. This was in March. This was spring break. And the rooms were already assigned for the fall. My dad listened to her talk, and he said, if they're all assigned, she started telling us about other places I could live off campus. He said, according to your catalog here, it says that all freshman women live on campus, and I'm expecting that to happen. Now, if it's not possible, we'll just change our minds and make arrangements for her to go someplace else. So he reached over and started taking the papers and things back, and then he said to her very casually, oh, my friend John has an office downtown. I'd like to, how do I get downtown? I think he's in the State House. John was John Bricker, and that was one of my father's friends. Well, naturally, when he announced the fact that he wanted some directions to go downtown, poor lady, she nearly flipped. She just got red from her V-neck dress all the way up to her hair. And she said, well, excuse me, just a minute. Would you hold on just a minute? She got up and went in the back room from where she was sitting out in the outer office. And she was gone a few minutes. And of course, we were talking, didn't pay any attention. But in a few minutes, she came back. She says, Mr. Thornton, would you and your wife like to take Barbara over and look at the rooms at Neal Hall? There may be an opening. And he says, well, no. He said, you told me that they were all filled up. He says, we can do something else. Oh, and we'd like for you to go. We'll check it out. Needless to say, we marched down to Neal Hall.
There's a bright side somewhere.
That was how I almost didn't get here. Because there was no room in the inn, and the inn was Neal Hall.